Having agency is defined as the capacity of individuals to act independently and to make their own free choices. Tune in to get an inside look at the inspiring uphill climb of businesswomen from around the world. I'm your host, Cheryl Gillihan, and this is Woman-Owned Agency. Today, I'm so excited to have Stacey Edelstein with me. She and I met through some joint communities that we're in together, and I know that you have been running Raygun for about 12 years now, and that's quite a journey. A lot has changed over those 12 years. So please, if you would give us a little introduction to yourself.
Sure. Well, it's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I always love to share great conversations about creativity and business and all of that. So it's such an honor. So yeah, Reagan, we've been around for a minute. So we got our start back in Brooklyn. I had met my partner while working at a nonprofit called StoryCorps, which I'm not sure if you're an NPR fan. But there's a weekly broadcast on NPR. It's an oral history project. So we had met working in-house there and had started, collaborating on creative projects, working on the website, creating marketing materials for the organization. And slowly but surely, we kind of started to take on some freelance work on the side. And, kind of anyone who needed a website logo, we were happy to do it. And eventually we kind of built up enough of a roster of clients, and we left and started working on Raygun full time. So really, I think the genesis of the studio came from just this really deep love of storytelling and being able to use design and technology to share stories that wouldn't necessarily get shared otherwise. And that's really kind of the inspiration for why we started Raygun and kind of what we're still doing to this day.
Well, I love StoryCorps. I didn't know that about you and your
Yay!
background. So, for those that don't know, and since that was kind of the genesis of where all this came from, tell us a little bit about StoryCorps and like the purpose of that.
Mhm. Sure, absolutely. So StoryCorps was founded by Dave Isay. He is a very well-known radio documentarian that had been working with the medium of radio to tell the stories of everyday people. And Dave's focus was always about, finding those stories that aren't being covered in mainstream media, or stories of folks that may be overlooked because of, who they are and what they do, their choices, things like that. So when he created StoryCorps, it was really all about trying to record the stories of everyday people, preserve them, and share them out to the world through broadcast partners like NPR and the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. So StoryCorps' mission is to do just that. So all across the country, folks are invited to come into a StoryCorps recording booth. It's free. You get 45 minutes to record an interview or a story with someone that you love. And so the idea is that, StoryCorps creates this really safe, quiet space for you to sit across from, someone like your grandmother or your best friend or, your coworker, and you get to ask them the questions that maybe we don't get a chance to ask every day. And so at the end of that recording, you get to keep a copy, and another copy gets archived at the Library of Congress. And then each week, there are edited clips from, the thousands of stories that get collected every year. An edited clip will be broadcast on the radio. All of those recordings are available online. There's also an animated series. So it's really just this beautiful project that is rooted in really preserving and sharing the voices of everyday people. So yeah, it's a fun listen. Storycorps.org. If you check out the stories there.
Yeah, and it
Yeah.
is really, truly a great mission. And
Hmm.
it's an important message to tell people like everybody has a story, right?
Right.
And
Hmm.
And I try to recognize that when a business comes to me and says, well, our story is just not that compelling. And I was like, I bet it is.
It's really, it's sad when you hear that, right? Because I think, we're in kind of the dominant culture, I think, in our country is so focused on celebrity and, just these wild stories that get attention. But there's so many beautiful moments in our everyday that are worth sharing, that are worth listening to. And I think it's so important if we can, especially as business owners and especially as, facilitators of strategy meetings and all of that, if we can kind of bring that lens and that reminder that yes, you have a story to tell, and that it's meaningful. um, and then I think that's part of what Raygun really tries to do with our clients as well, is not only honor that but also figure out, well, what's the best way to tell it, right? So that people are going to listen, that it's going to stand out amongst all the noise and everything out there. So I'm always so excited when I meet a StoryCorps fan, because you just get it, you so I appreciate that. I appreciate that a lot.
And so they've
Yeah.
evolved into different mediums. How do you kind of bring that out for the businesses that you work with? Like, is there a better medium? Does it vary from client to client? How does that work from a
Mhm.
ray gun side of things?
Sure. Yeah, I think that we are always trying to think about how we can use new mediums and try new things as a way to communicate, the message that our clients are trying to send out. I think that it's always worth exploring what's out there and trying new things, because you never know when you're going to hit on something just so impactful, or just give yourself that space, that creative space, to think about, well, what else, what if we tried something new. Um, so I lately have been trying to sort of encourage some clients to get into the podcast space. Although I know this is a medium that has been around for a long time, it's not necessarily something that everyone embraces, because, as you know, it takes a lot, right, to
Hmm.
produce something worth listening to. So trying to encourage our clients, if they've only been on social media, if they've only been kind of, email and Instagram, well, can you use the medium of audio and radio, and think about ways to create, an engaging piece of content that maybe you haven't tried before? It might present opportunities to tell the story in a much different way. So I really love that. I also really am encouraging a lot of clients to think about community building in in real life, like through events, how they can use gatherings like talks and workshops and outreach with the community and in new ways to bring people in. It's we spend so much time in these digital spaces. What else can we do to bring people together, to remind us of, our what we all share and our common humanity? And so I really try to encourage people, don't forget about those face-to-face components, because I think that can really go a long way to building relationships that are meaningful and will last a long time. Yeah.
It's really scary to get into a new medium. I know that it took my team about 2 or 3 years to get me
Oh,
into
interesting.
podcasting.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
It
What do
wasn't
you
something I was comfortable with.
Okay, what was kind of challenging for you or scary for you?
I think that I felt like podcasts were very uh, me talking to myself. It's how it felt.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
I didn't envision it in this format where I was interviewing somebody, which is
Mhm.
so much more conversational and it can go anywhere. And I love that about this format. Um, when it was like, get on a podcast, share your learnings from the day, I just couldn't get myself to do it. Of course, I
Mhm.
had things that I wanted to share, but text was much easier for me, and writing is a format that I'm more comfortable with. And so, actually, getting on a recording with my face or even with my voice and sharing my learnings was just really challenging. I felt like I was talking to myself, even though I knew I was putting it out there for other people.
Hmm.
It felt very awkward. And so, what we started doing initially was I had a team member who, when we hosted workshops with clients, so for example, you were talking about like use those in person moments, she would actually start recording at random times to kind of capture some insights. And, it wasn't planned. It was just kind of, if we catch it, we catch it. If we don't, we don't. Um, and just getting some of the recordings and started that way, because there are
Hmm.
definitely things that come out in those interactions, and that's so much easier for me in person. I'm fine, but on video it was just so daunting.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
then,
I can relate. Yeah.
this idea of doing like a woman owned agency and just interviewing other women, I thought, well, I can do that.
Right. Well, right. Because it sometimes it really takes that that moment of like, oh, this is what interests me. This is what is going to get me so excited to say yes to this. And it takes a little digging sometimes, right? But
It does.
I think, and that's something I try to actually remind myself a lot is that um, even if it takes a couple tries, even if it takes a couple, experimentations with the format, eventually you're going to land on something you're so excited about and that you're going to say yes to all the time. But if that doesn't happen right away, that's okay too, because it's all practice, right, for what
Mhm.
comes next. So I love that you had that openness and willingness to try because I think especially sharing these stories, our stories for others to hear and to learn from. I mean, I think this is so important to, advancing equity and equality in our industry, which is, still very lacking in terms of female leadership. So I think it's such an important cause. So good for you. I love
Thank
it.
you. So going back to you, how did you get, you mentioned StoryCorps and that kind of led to Raygun, but let's go way back. Like even before StoryCorps, did you envision yourself owning a business one day? Like was that always in the plan somewhere?
I think in the back of my head, yes. My dad has always been an entrepreneur and small business owner since I could remember. So for him, or for me rather, growing up and sort of seeing him take the helm and lead, groups of people and have his own office, and he had a warehouse that he used to take us to on the weekends, and my sister and I would it was very empty and he had to get work done. So he let us loose in the office. So we got to, go have fun looking through, all the cabinets and racing wheelie chairs down the warehouse aisles and things like that. So I always had a very positive, I think, outlook on entrepreneurship and small business ownership. So I think that to me felt like a natural road to go. Um, and so, the thing is, though, I didn't, go to business school, I didn't go to design school. But I think those things eventually found me and I answered that calling because it's not an easy road, right? It's tough, but it's also highly rewarding and gives me the opportunity to explore other creative endeavors and ideas and projects that I don't know that I would necessarily have the space for if I were if I went a different route. Yeah, so it's part of our family history, I guess. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's great that you had
Yeah.
that model. And
Yeah.
so there
Hmm.
wasn't necessarily a huge, I don't want to say there wasn't fear going into it, but you saw the rewards of it having
Hmm.
grown up with it. So that's
Hmm.
really nice. I've felt the same
Hmm.
thing. It is really hard. It's very daunting. And there are days when I'm just like, I just need to find a job and get
Yeah,
out
I
of this.
know.
But then I
Right?
think about
Yeah.
where our family is now and the
Mhm.
things that we get to do together and some of the experiences we get to have. And I think, like, oh, well, we wouldn't have been able to take that trip because I just
Right.
would have had to ask off
Hmm.
work and there would have been so many things to navigate. And it would have just been,
Hmm.
I would have just put it off. And I think that when I was working for somebody else, I tended never to take vacation because I knew that
Mm-hmm.
when I came back, there was just so much waiting for me.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Whereas
Yeah.
now I'm more likely to say like, oh my gosh, I work all the time because it's always on my brain. I have
Mm-hmm.
to take vacation.
Right.
It's almost
Yes.
like a self-care requirement at this point.
Absolutely. I think that's so huge when we think about what does it take to be a great leader and a great business owner. It is having that balance and finding that harmony of, what do you need as a person, in addition to what do you need as a business owner. So I think that's something I'm always checking in with myself about. Is this, am I feeling imbalance, or am I struggling, and do I need to take a beat and really reevaluate and think about that? Because we have to, everyone's kind of relying on us, right? There's a lot of pressure, but you know that's how diamonds are made, right? Isn't there like that saying or something like that? So
Yeah.
I think that's huge. Yeah, taking vacation, you got to do it, right? Even if it's a day, even if it's take Friday off, I think that can help with that reset and that re-energizing that we need all the time. Yeah,
Mhm.
I love
So
that.
tell me a little bit more about the stories that you have gotten to experience with the projects that you've worked on, because I know that you've worked on some cool projects.
Yeah, absolutely. For us at Raygun, our focus is really helping, you know, bold causes tell their story, and by that, it's really also about telling the stories of the communities that are benefiting and thriving as a result, of the work of our clients. Some of our recent favorite projects have been with our client, the California Endowment, which is the state's largest private health foundation. And so their focus is really all about social justice and health justice, and creating a California where no matter who you are, where you're from, or your orientation or origin, California is a place where anyone can belong, and should belong, and should have the means to thrive. And obviously, there's a lot wrapped up in that, but I think the effort of the endowment to create space to tell the stories of people in California and celebrate all of the diversity and different types of people that live here, has been something that we've been a part of for the last year and a half. So working with them to create campaigns that do just that, that really celebrate who we are as Californians. And through that process, we've created video series that are anything from day in the life of different grassroots organizers from the northern part of the state through central down to Southern California, where we are. Um, really creating those profiles of people as told by them. So not necessarily, it's not told through the perspective of the endowment, but rather we're helping them to pass the mic to people who are on the ground doing really amazing work in their communities. And as a result, the folks who have participated in these videos, who participated in our campaigns, again, the everyday people who are doing such great work, they've experienced this amazing just sense of empowerment, sense of agency, because they're, again, going back to StoryCorps, they're being told, they're that their stories matter, that they deserve to have a voice. And by the endowment extending the mic, and what we say, passing the mic and turning up the volume on the stories of everyday people, it's really creating this beautiful ecosystem of media and representation that we don't necessarily get to see anywhere else. So to have been participating in that with them, again, over the last year and a half, has been hugely transformative, I think, for all of us participating in it, and I think for the endowment themselves as well, because we really are understanding what can we do with these amazing resources, and how can we really start to shift culture through this process of storytelling. So anyway, so yeah, so that's something I've been just just blown away by the partnership with the endowment, the willingness of people to step up and share their stories, to put their own face on a billboard and stand up for what they believe in. I mean, it's there's so much courage in sharing these, sharing your voice and things like that. That yeah, it's been great. So it's taught me a lot too, I think, about what makes a great story and how to make people feel comfortable enough to step up and do that. So I'm happy to share actually some assets and graphics and things with you too, with the listeners, so that they can kind of see what it means to be, in a state that welcomes people no matter who they are. Yeah.
That's really incredible. Really
Hmm.
incredible. So I have
Hmm.
two questions related to that. First, specifically, what was your team's role in kind of participating in that? Is it the
Hmm.
marketing aspect? Is it the recording of the stories? Like, what were the different services you actually provided at Raygun for that?
Sure. Yeah. So kind of a range, mostly on the creative side. So starting with concepting and helping um sort of translate the client's goals and sort of strategic vision into a campaign that would help them best communicate their message and their vision for California. So we kind of helped in the early stages of figuring out, okay, what is it that we want to say, why are we saying this, and what form could it take when we put it out there. So that included writing, design, layout, production. We also did participate in the photo shoots and video shoots to provide those teams with, the creative direction and art direction that would, allow us to then pull everything together. And then our studio doesn't, do marketing, kind of like marketing execution or anything like that, but we do provide that, design and sort of strategy partnership with our clients, so that as their teams kind of take the assets and start, putting it out into the world, that we can be there to help make sure, this is staying on brand, staying on message, and creating additional assets as needed. So yeah, so it was really a little bit of everything along the way. So and what I really love about, in particular, working with the endowment too, is that they have several different agency partners that they tap depending on the area of specialty that they need. So, and I really love that approach, because it allows small businesses like ourselves to be able to work on some, pretty large projects. But we don't have to take all of the work on ourselves. We can learn from and collaborate with other agencies who might specialize in something that we don't. And so I think the end result for the client in particular is so much greater, because they get the benefit of lots of different, creative people and their expertise, and this, willingness to collaborate that, I think just results in a much better outcome. So that's something that's been really exciting for us to see and learn along the way.
Yes, I agree. When you can get that collective alliance of partners together and they're
Hmm.
willing to collaborate and work together, I think that just creates magic. It's been really beautiful in some of our projects as well. So, my second
So good.
question related to this project specifically is, you've been doing this for a long time, like, and there's been so many stories told. As a Californian yourself, how has this like transformed you, like, personally, and
Hmm.
impacted you kind of in your personal life? Have you seen any like awareness or changes or things that have impacted you?
Ooh, I just got little chills when you asked that. What a great question. I love that. Absolutely. I think that, for me, it's always been a reminder to listen, right? Listening is at the heart of creating understanding between people for reminding ourselves that there's so much more in common than that we have in common, and it's so important to honor that through listening and just really taking a beat. um, and so I think that's been this huge reminder for me, that it's so important to take the time to listen and understand. I don't have to be the first one that speaks, and I think that's actually a huge strength. I think also reinvigorated me in a lot of ways in terms of like fighting for the causes that I believe in, and really making sure that I'm continuing to create space within my own community for people to not only share their stories, but reminding people as well, you also need to just listen. Um, so I think that's been really impactful for me personally, because I do a lot of organizing, just not it's kind of adjacent to Raygun, but it's also just me. That I think that's been important to carry into my work, especially recognizing when we are asking people to stand up and share, we need to also be at the same time creating safe spaces for people to do so, and ensuring that we're not creating any harm along the way. So I think all of it together has been a really exciting journey and evolution for me personally, and I hope to continue to share that with people, going forward. So
You
yeah,
and I are
that's
so
great.
very aligned on our
Oh,
values and the things that we
yay!
care about.
That's
I
awesome.
think
I
that's
love
what makes
it.
this so much easier. Yeah, I love it too. It's fantastic.
Hmm.
I want
Hmm.
to know more about what you said just a minute ago. You said it's ray gun, but it's also just me. And I
Hmm.
have had that conflict of thinking a lot to try to figure out like
Hmm.
what is me representing my company and what is me just being me, and do I always just represent my company even when I'm being me? And
Hmm.
trying to
Hmm.
figure out, is there actually a delineation there, or is it all just the same thing? And how have you kind of reconciled that thinking of like what is the company and where does that line
Yeah.
separate?
Uh-huh. Like where does Reagan end? Where do I begin? Yeah. Well, gosh, it's interesting. It's a good one. I want to think about this one a little bit more too, because maybe what I say today might not be true in a little bit, and that's okay too, right?
That's
Sometimes
okay.
that's awesome. Like when we can look back on things and be like, "Huh, that's cute," but that's not true, or that's changed, and I think that's fine. So, for me, I have typically traditionally always wanted to have a bit of separation between business and personal, even though so much of it overlaps and so much of it is influenced by the other one. Something my mentor taught me and loves to reinforce is it's a both and, right? It can be both and it's okay if sometimes it's a little different today than it is tomorrow. I don't know. So things are fluid, but I do think it is important to have that uh, have that space to sort of explore as a person your own interests, or if there is a creative calling, that you have the space to explore that's not necessarily tied to the business, or sometimes stifled, I think, a little bit by the business too. For instance, I within the last maybe year or so, um, have been exploring coaching, speaker coaching, as kind of a side gig. That's, you're hiring me, you're not necessarily hiring Raygun. But the work that I do with coaching and helping people to better tell their story more on a stage, let's say, or, by, usually I'm prepping people to give a talk. A lot of those skills still transfer over to the work that we're doing with our clients. So it's not this like, huge delineation, but I do also think it's important for us to be able to explore things outside of our business so that we can we can learn new skills and maybe bring a new perspective to the work that ultimately benefits everybody. Because I also think too that and I will say by doing that, it's allowed me to explore elements of like my identity or my interests that help me rise above maybe some challenges I've been having with the business and help me find a little bit of lightness when things might be a little tricky with the business. And so I think having that sort of multidimensional identity can really help us, especially in times of struggle and challenge, because I'm not Raygun and Raygun is not me, but we can coexist together, if that makes sense. I
That
don't know.
makes
How do
total
you
sense.
how do you approach it? Yeah, because
No,
that's such an interesting question. I love it.
I love everything that you said. And like you, my partner and I are in business together as well. And
Hmm.
I was so angry at the DMV last month. Like, so I'm still angry about it. I mean, like yesterday in the car, I was like, it's just so ridiculous. People can be smarter than the computers. And I was ranting and raving about it. And I was like, I just feel like calling them out on every social media platform and writing letters to my congressman. And
Hmm.
I was
Hmm.
very frustrated. And he goes, yeah, I don't think calling them out on social media is on brand for you.
That's not on brand. That's cute.
Well, I mean, like, but part of it is that the reason Cause Labs is what it is because I am what I am, right? And I have
Mm,
certain values that I kind of uphold. And I think he's right to an extent, like me calling out the DMV. I mean, everybody's angry with the DMV. We have been for decades, but ever since its
it's a
existence,
challenge.
right?
It
Um,
can be a challenge, yeah.
And so he's right. Like, I'm just frustrated right now. It isn't really me to like go out and rant about them, you know?
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
but then I was thinking about like, okay, well, is he meaning like on Cause Labs brand because I'm representing Cause Labs or like on my brand?
Mm,
And it's
yes.
interesting to like recognize that there is so much the same about the two brands because I have formed the company in the image of what I want it to be, right? And of course,
Hmm.
it takes a life of its own when there's a team kind of co creating with you, but you
Hmm.
tend to hire a team that also has the same values and fits
Absolutely.
with that, right? And we work with clients that align with our values, and everything is sort of values centric. And so,
Yep.
this company brand feels so tied to my personal brand. So I love that you listed an example that was very related, like speaker coaching,
Hmm.
because there are things like that that I enjoy doing just on my own that is not related to the company. But I
Hmm.
do kind of feel like our brands are synonymous.
Yes, absolutely. And I think, um, and I think that's not a bad thing, right? I think that when we have a really when business leaders in particular have a really strong sense of values, are really driven by values, can lead with that, and can help ensure a really positive culture can be cultivated amongst the team. I think that's really positive, and that's a good thing. I think where us as leaders being able to take care of ourselves also and feel like we can have the space to be a person that's separate from the business, and that is actually okay, and that is also a good thing. I think that just creates opportunity for kind of more well-rounded practices that give us a little bit of breathing room and not so much pressure to always be on and always be the perfect whatever. um, That's kind of how I'm seeing it these days, is just, you know, providing some space, some breathing room that I think is really necessary, because if not, I think it could get a little bit stifling, I don't know, or just a little bit much. Well, and also you bring up the fact of, that is another good point of, I run this business with my husband, and so I'm literally, yes, I'm all wrapped up in all of it all the time. But we also set boundaries of we've always been so good at like 5 p.m. Well, you know, 6 p.m. maybe, we, you know, we knock off for the day, right? And if we're sitting together and we're having a conversation that's like not interrupted by our daughter, who we love, and I love her so much, you know, if we're sitting and having a conversation, you know, and it starts to trickle into work, we always say like, okay, this is our couple's time, this is our time, personal time together, that is separate from the business, because, you know, we have things we want to talk about that aren't the business. And so we've always been really good about setting those boundaries and setting those expectations and agreements with each other, so that, you know, again, our relationship isn't necessarily defined by the business is part of it, but it's not the whole of it, right? So
Right.
yeah, and so I think, you know, kind of going back to, if we can do that as a couple, you know, we should be able to do that, um for ourselves personally, I think. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think I'd go crazy if I was always on. I mean, I can't imagine what it's like for celebrities who have the paparazzi following them around and they always have to be
Yeah.
the celebrity, you
No.
know?
That is, yeah, that is not my journey, and I would not wish it on anyone. Like that, that's nuts. But, you know, I guess that's some people's job too. It's
Hmm.
kind of wild. So, you know, I think, yeah, I think I landed in the right spot for me, health wise,
That's
mental
great.
health wise too. Yeah.
That's great. Well, this was such a fascinating conversation, and I just want to keep going. I have so many questions for you, and I know that we'll just continue our discussion. But for the recording, would love to know if there are any women-owned agencies that you work with and partner with, or that you would love to work with and haven't worked with yet, that you would like to give any shout outs to.
Ooh, love that question. Yes. Well, my first immediate folks that popped into my head are my San Diego crew here, who San Diego is such a collaborative, creative city, and I really appreciate, especially the women-owned agencies here who have supported me and who are always advocating for us, and are just such a great folks to have in your corner. So, Jen Dirks at Thorfinn, Kim and Riva at Alpha Charlie. There's Jamie, and also her husband Kareem at Mixed Communications, who, we actually often partner together on work, and I would love to keep working with them too. So Jamie, if you're listening, that's for you. And I'm sure there's so many that I'm forgetting, and I will remember after this. But those are some folks I've been in touch with recently who've just been, outstanding partners. And then, yeah, I've always admired, Teal Media out of New York, and Big Deck, who are also great cause-driven, organizations that I really love and respect and look up to, and learn from them a lot, because they're producing some really great thought leadership for, you know, the cause industry that, I think is so important to lift up and support. Um, so yeah, those are the folks that come to mind now. But I'm sure I'll remember more. Maybe I can send them send them over to you too. Oh,
You
and
can
of
send
course,
them over.
Mangrove, yeah, Mangrove, who connected us, who are incredible, web development partners, with us too, and just really appreciate Maya and her team, and what they stand for as well.
Yeah, Maya's fantastic. All
Yeah.
right. Well, any others that you think of, you can send over. We'll put it into the show notes and get those edited in. All right. Thank you
Awesome.
so much. This was awesome. And Stacey, I loved getting to meet you and learning more about Raygun.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it and love what you're doing, and I hope we can keep collaborating. So thank you.
Sounds great.